Good morning, Manna Church. Jeff Christensen here once again, and welcome to part 4 of our look at the sufficiency and supremacy of God for morning manna. I personally grew up in an old school church environment. It was very traditional liturgy where the pastor wore robes and they had people who lit candles on the altar at the beginning of the service, and we only sang hymns, that kind of traditional. And I remember when I was in high school, I saw for the very first time a team from another church doing contemporary worship music, which it was back in the 90s, so it's old school, but it's a bit more like the kind of music that we do here at Manna. And honestly, I was totally put off. I remember thinking, man, this is garbage. There's no way this stuff honors God. I was actually mad about it. I remember being mad about it. The fact is that my tradition was preventing me from seeing the beauty in something new. In his letter to the Ephesians, Paul has some things to say about traditions and about how they have created problems for the people of God. Now, Paul isn't addressing the issue of church music or whether or not pastors should wear robes. Nothing to do with that. He's actually addressing Jewish law and the division that has arisen over its practice. But I want you to see how he phrases this in Ephesians 2:14 and 15. He says, "For he himself is our peace," meaning Christ, "who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace." See, with the death and resurrection of Jesus, the law had been fulfilled on behalf of God's people. But there were a number of law-observant Jewish Christians who looked down on the Gentile Christians for not practicing the Jewish law. See, the law was given in the Old Testament as a good thing. It was a good thing. And it still is a good thing. I mean, the 10 Commandments are still relevant for our lives today. We need to still pursue holy living and moral excellence like we see God outlining in the Old Testament. All of that is good. But what Paul was saying here is that the law had now been fulfilled for God's people by Jesus. Observing the law was no longer how God's covenant with his people was regulated. I mean, it was 613 commandments. Who can do all of that, right? So in that sense, it had become a tradition that needed to be let go of. See, the truth is that Jesus is exalted above every tradition. Now, hear me on this. The gospel and the word of God never changes. But our methods, our traditions, those are never going to be permanent. If we let ourselves think that our way is the only way, then we get arrogant and we end up divided from our brothers and sisters in the faith. The church traditions that I grew up with were created to be something good, and they're still good, but they don't have exclusive claim. No tradition of man does. We can embrace traditions, we can enjoy them and celebrate them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the moment we think that our traditions or our methods of how we do what we do for God, the moment we think that that's the only way, we start to miss the power of the gospel, which is the one truth that can bring together people from many different traditions. Jesus is exalted above every tradition, and Jesus alone can bring us all together. Good to be with you today, Manna Church. Come back tomorrow for part 5 of our look at the sufficiency and supremacy of God for morning manna.